self-talk doesn't take up any time.
Sounds extreme, but you may get to a point where your kids and family actually have to take care of you.
You can choose to either beat yourself up and tell yourself that you should be doing more, or you can choose to be like, okay, shit's a little hectic, but we've got this.
Learning to be okay with, one, asking for help when you need it, two, communicating when you're struggling, and three, accepting the help you've asked for when you're struggling.
So you say no, you feel guilty, you're like, okay, actually, do you know what, I can do this. And then you're essentially basing your decision just off that guilt.
That health needs to become the base because it's the most important thing.
But no one actually plans their downtime. And I mean, if you don't plan it and life's busy, you're going to be like, oh, I don't have time for that. I'll just put it to the end of the pile.
But like, if I make everyone else happy, then that means that I'll be happy.
You say yes to one thing, you're saying no to everything else. Hey there, and welcome to the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you're passionate about staying fit, healthy, and mentally sharp, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Matt Cooney, and each week we dive into the latest trends, expert insights, and actionable tips to help you take your fitness, nutrition, and mental well-being to the next level. Ready to level up your health and fitness? Let's jump in and get started. Welcome back to another episode of the Future Fitness Lifestyle podcast. We are delighted to have you here, and firstly, we are delighted to be here because this podcast is actually easy. This is the easy part. The hard part is getting the five of us onto this software and our microphones and cameras working. If you were a fly on the wall for the last, how long? 24 minutes, you would, I think, Sharon, you said that should be a podcast or a video in itself. I think it would go viral. But we finally have it. Lucky we talk about stress management a lot in this podcast because we need to use all of it to get to be able to actually be calm and speak. So I don't know, how is everybody else? How you all else feeling?
That stress was enough stress for all of this. I feel easy breezy going into this.
Definitely. And before we even get in, that's a little snippet of a nugget. I think even for me, I feel a lot more relaxed the whole technical thing going into this. And I think it just shows the power of like repetition and just putting the reps in. And especially when you're doing something that's out of your comfort zone or new, just sticking with it. And you literally will just get better by default by just showing up each week and doing the thing you need to do. So today we are going to talk about a really important topic. Tommy, do you want to introduce the topic to the people?
Yeah. We are going to be talking about prioritizing yourself.
Nice. And why we're going to be looking at why you must put yourself first. So, Tommy, what I suppose when we say that, what are the first things that comes to your mind?
I suppose the first thing that comes to mind is that the amount of times that we don't put ourselves first and that we put other people's feelings or choices before our own, and how much of a negative impact that can have in our lives, and the consequences of living and functioning that way through a long period of time. Like I said, how damaging it can be to our own individual health, so it can.
Yeah. And we were literally just talking about this morning or over the last day, back and forward on voice notes. And I was like, it's funny because we're literally doing a podcast on that exact thing this week because it's something that comes up so many times with clients and everybody in general. Like even a lot of the listeners, as soon as I say about putting yourself first, for a lot of people straight away it's like, yeah, I know I don't, or I neglect myself, or I end up putting everybody else first. Okay, so question to everybody here. Has anybody here related to that in terms of not putting themselves first? Can anybody say, yeah, that was me?
All say that. We've been conditioned to think that self first is selfish in a negative sense, and that even growing up, like if you did put yourself first, or if you put too much effort into yourself and stuff, people were like, oh, you're full of yourself. this one. You know, it was almost a negative thing to put yourself on a high pedestal or look at yourself highly. And I know that's probably everyone growing up, but especially in Ireland, so all very guilty of that trap.
Yeah, and I definitely think for me, a lot of the time with putting myself first and things like that, I think with, especially at work, like you might just get up in the morning and be like, I'm too busy, I've too much to do, I just need to get straight into things, and not realizing like actually doing something for yourself first thing, or you know, even something small, and just starting your day in a much more relaxed state, just having done something small for yourself, you'll be able to get a lot more then from your work, and you know, you'll be better for everyone else if you take that little bit of time for yourself first thing.
Yeah. And first, actually, side note, can we all give Eve a big congratulations? She just finished a 10K run this morning. First ever. Let's embarrass the shit out of her now. But
it's like, you passed me out.
Yeah.
Like the little tortoise, I started really slow and then like
She's got the bug now.
Yeah. I'm one of those psychos that loves running.
Tommy, Barcelona Marathon. Eve could be beside you.
The goal. That is the goal.
Finish this podcast and go run a 10K.
I literally am. That's what I am doing.
One for 6K, but fuck it, 10. Come on.
Yeah, Eve was meant to do 9 and she ended up doing 10.
That was your goal before we came to Marbella, wasn't it? That was the goal.
That was my goal for October, and I'm after like doing it on the second day, so I need to push myself a little bit more now.
Eve can take the rest of the month off now. She just finished her goal in 24 hours.
I am the county for the rest of the month, you're grand.
Yeah.
But as well, for you, Eve, imagine this, like looking at how we always say getting out of your comfort zone. Like if we look at the 1st of January, if I would have said to you on what day is it? On the 2nd of October this year, you would have ran a 10K and then done a podcast. That would be your morning. You would probably say, not in a million years. Not if here's $5,000. No, that won't happen.
Yeah.
True?
Yeah, I definitely would have laughed at you.
You literally would have said, like, that is the stupidest thing you've ever said. Why?
Yeah.
I will never do that.
I can see her saying that as well.
And looking at me like, why would you even say something like that? People, this is what can happen when you put yourself first. And something on that, obviously we talk about what I call a performance pyramid a lot. So your personal life, professional, physical. And I think what happens, if you look at it like, split them into 3. So obviously the base of the pyramid is the biggest, the top is the smallest. For a lot of people, what happens is their personal or professional life takes the base of the pyramid, and then their physical health is at the top. So it's that little piece. And I think it needs to swap. That health needs to become the base because it's the most important thing. And I know it's cliche and it's been overused, is like your health is your wealth, but it's so true, because when we look at it, it's like, okay, most people put their personal life, so again, I think kids, other people, or their profession or their career. And it's like, okay, why are people doing that? So your personal, it's because you want to take care of your kids and your family, right? But the thing is, if you don't take care of your health, it may actually be flipped. Sounds extreme, but you may get to a point where your kids and family actually have to take care of you and have to provide for you because you're not able to. You're not physically healthy enough to do that, and that's can be scary, and it is, but it's understanding that and knowing that, prioritizing your health and yourself it's not selfish. And if you want to be the best version of yourself, you're going to be better for your kids, and same thing with your professional. A lot of people put their professional as the base. That's the biggest thing. Why do we do that? Usually it's because you want to make money to provide for your family. And the thing is, if you don't take care of your health, it may cost you with time and money, because illness, sickness, you might get to a point where you actually can't work because, again, you've now overworked, You haven't looked after your health, and now that's costing you. You know, you're picking up the pieces. So hopefully, by just using that analogy and understanding it, that people can understand that, like, it's not like an option. It should be a non-negotiable. It's should be the priority, and you have to do it in order. And like the good thing with it is the reason why you put your family or your career first is to be better at that, to be the best version of yourself for your kids, or show up with the job, get that promotion or whatever, build a business. When you put yourself health first, you can still do all that at actually a higher level and a better level. So it's actually a net benefit. Does that make sense to people, or am I gone off on a tangent?
But I think, and I'll probably say this in every episode we talk about, I think it always comes back to self-worth. Because we've been conditioned to think that our worth is on what we do for others, what we want to do. Everyone just wants to feel like they're worthy of being here on this earth and taking up space. And we've been conditioned to think to do all the things for other people. We're all very hypocritical because we're not telling ourselves that we're worthy of slowing down and taking some time. Those just like happen in my apartment.
Let's confirm that Roisin is safe and sound, and
It's next
whatever
door, I think.
earthquake or whatever just happened, we are committed. We are committed to this episode.
I think that part though, Matt, I can't remember what you were talking about when you were talking about like kind of, you know, the kind of dial of, you know, what you're doing for your physical health. Like obviously sometimes like work is going to be busier, home life is going to be busier, your priorities might shift a little bit. But I think what can happen is people just throw everything out the window because they can't get everything done. But it's just like, okay, maybe I mightn't get a walk in every day, or I mightn't get to the gym this week. But what can I do? You know, that you are still looking after you and kind of managing your energy input to yourself when there are other priorities that you have to focus on for that week or two. And then it's just easier to readjust to get yourself back to where you want to be, instead of like that in out.
Yeah, and
That's
that's the analogy I always use, is like a light switch versus a dial. So a lot of people are a switch, which is either on or off, and that's the way they approach their diet, their training, and instead of using a dial that is a dimmer, goes, you can turn it up, you can turn it down. It's never that way. You're never fully off, and this is where the whole wagon, falling off the wagon that doesn't exist, that saying drives me nuts, happens. Whereas when you use a dimmer, you're never, you realize I'm not on this crazy imaginary wagon that everybody talks about. It's just that this sometimes different, like you said, different things are going to come up. You're going to have deadlines in work. You're going to have kids sick, whatever parent teacher means. You're going to have different things that you can know. Okay, the dial for my health needs to be turned down a little bit. Like I don't have the time, you know, to work out, say 4 days a week, but can I do 2? Or maybe I don't have 60 minutes. Can I do 20? And that also keeps the momentum going, you know. And like you said, Sharon, then it's like you can turn the dial back up, versus it's a lot harder to keep switching things on and off, you know. And yeah, it's one of those things. It's probably the biggest, one of the most common things we see is people's kind of mindset and approach to that. And like you said, it's often because they can't do it all, and they get overwhelmed and they get frustrated, and then they feel guilty, and it becomes this vicious loop, you know, which is definitely hard to break as well.
I think that can change, that doesn't, like, even when you are busy and you're hectic, you talk, pick up any time. Working on your self-talk and knowing that even in those moments where shit's hitting the fan and you don't have time to put in the workout, you can choose to either beat yourself up and tell yourself that you should be doing more, or you can choose to be like, okay, a little hectic, but we've got this. And that's where your self-talk, it's not taking up any time. make a huge difference.
And that actually bleeds into the next perfect segue into the next topic that I wanted to discuss with kind of Sharon, and that's like you said, bro. Self-talk is like mom guilt. So without doubt, the most common thing that I hear from mothers, especially starting out, is not prioritizing themselves. It's putting themselves to the bottom of the pile. And I always have this wash basket vision in my head, which I literally just made up. But it's like, you know, when you have the pile of washing clothes and you constantly are taking from the top and washing them, and the ones that are at the bottom, you never get to the bottom, and then you just keep piling crap on top of it. That's what I feel like is happening for people. It's like their health is at that bottom of the wash basket, and they just never get to it because it's constant. There's constantly more washing to do. Eve's probably laughing because she's like, not that you would know anything about washing.
You
I see
actually,
the basket and put things in it.
you just learned how to turn on the washing machine last week.
He knows now.
True, true, true.
That is true.
We're not talking about my washing skills, okay? We're talking about mom guilt. Sharon, help me here.
Yeah, like I suppose mom guilt is it's a really funny one because like if you don't have kids, you don't get it, and you can't really explain it, and it doesn't make sense, you know. And I suppose over the years, I've kind of learned it's that feeling is kind of always going to be there, but I suppose it's learning to get a little bit more comfortable with it. Like when, you know, maybe sometimes I might be in the gym and I'm like, oh my God, I need to be at home. The house like a bomb hit. The dinners need to be cooked. I should be doing X, Y, Z. It's kind of being like, no, if I just stay here and get what I need to get done, when I get home, I'm actually going to be in a better mood. I'm going to be less stressed, and I'm going to be able to do everything I need to do without as much stress or feelings of overwhelm. And it takes so much practice. And it's not, I suppose, it's learning to not react when you have that feeling. So often what happens is you get the feeling, then your reaction is, oh no, I can't do this for myself. And then you put yourself on the back burner because you were uncomfortable with that feeling, or like Roisin said, with your self-talk. And I think for me, I learned over the years, it's number one, the expectations that I have placed on myself and we all place on ourselves, that we think, okay, like everything has to be perfect. And I think when I stepped away from that kind of, I have to keep everything going all the time, and took more of a like balancing approach, and it's something I kind of do talk about a lot. It's kind of like, okay, some days, you know, home life might be in the red, but physical and work might be in the green. It's looking, okay, how can I just shift my focus back to where it needs to be without like beating myself up. Second thing I learned is I don't have to do everything on my own. No, sometimes you end up in a place of, oh, it's just easier. I just do everything myself. I can do everything myself. I'm not going to ask for help. Or maybe in the past, my experience as well, maybe I could have been asking for help in the wrong places. So it was like reaffirming, oh, you need to do all this by yourself. So it was like learning to be okay with one, asking for help when you need it, two, communicating when you're struggling, and three, accepting the help you've asked for when you're struggling. You know, it's instead of being like, oh, come here, could you just give me a hand? I'm really struggling with this. And then someone's like, yeah, of course, no bother. And you're like, but are you sure? Are you sure you don't mind? And it's like putting your hand out to ask, but also like receiving it as well. I think also for me with mom guilt, it has got easier as Grace has got older, because she's able to communicate with me. You know, she's able to like tell me. You know, when they're younger, they can't really tell you things. You can't explain things. Whereas, you know, I remember could have been last year, the year before, like life was just busy. I was working a lot, and I remember just being like, oh, Grace, look, you have to go to Nan's again this evening. I'm so sorry, you know, and I was feeling so guilty. And she was like, oh, but Mammy, I love going to my nanny's house. You know, the guilt was on me. She was quite content with where she was going. She was so happy. And that was something at the time when work was busy for me and I was trying to keep everything going. It was feeling that kind of that inner struggle of, oh my God, you know, I'm pulling and dragging out people so much, you know, and you have to do that. I have to do that as a single mother, you know. You do have to ask for a lot of help. But I remember I was kind of chatting about it in therapy, and when it was put to me that, like, you know, she's getting so many different experiences with everybody she's with, and that made me feel a lot more ease in it, you know, instead of beating myself up, feeling guilty. And you know, with I remember hearing an analogy. Stop me now if I'm rambling, but I remember hearing an analogy before, and I thought it was just the best analogy ever. And it's like, being a parent is like being a wrestler. You know, you're going into that ring and you're given absolutely everything you have, but like, children have so much more energy than us, you know, they demand so much from us that sometimes we just have to tag someone in to give us a hand. You know, you can't stay in the ring on your own. You have to step out. You have to tag someone else in and just take a few minutes, step back into your own corner, take that time for yourself, and then go back into the ring with more energy. And you know, and people talk, and we talk all the time about time management. And I was having a conversation yesterday with someone, and they said it's also about energy management, how we manage our energy levels and how we take the time for ourselves to do what we need to bring up our energy so that we can give to everybody else who needs our energy. And again, it's so cliche, but like, if you don't fill your own cup, you can't pour out to everybody else, or you'll be doing it from maybe a place of lack or fear or even resentment.
Oh, I was saying, I think you made a good point there when you were saying it's also very important about the stories we tell ourselves. We do something for ourselves. We're telling ourselves that, like you and Grace, you're telling yourself that, oh, Grace is missing you and she's disappointed that you're not, like, that you're constantly sending her to her granny's house. When in actual fact, Grace is happy out and she's, you know, we communicating and been like, what are you getting from this? We've already convinced ourselves that that person is ashamed of us, or we've done something wrong to them, when in actual fact that person might be, especially for mothers, like your kids seeing you putting in effort and looking after yourself and putting yourself first, you're showing your children that they can do that and that they should be doing that, and that when they grow up they should be prioritizing themselves. And they're probably loving to see like you in a better mood and all of this, but then the story you're telling yourself is that you're neglecting them, or you're not giving them your time, or, you know, it's very important to, like, and I even love that exercise, is to write down sometimes when you're in that headspace, is what's the story you're telling yourself? Is there actual truth to that? Or like, have you communicated with the other people to know if they feel the way you're telling yourself?
I think, Sharon, like, from everything you said there, there's so many points to unpack from it, and I think so many mothers especially will really relate to it. First off, congrats on that analogy. I pride myself on analogies. I never have heard that with the rest of it. I was like, that is a brilliant analogy. And I'm just going back. Me and Eve watched Mr. McMahon there this week or on the weekend, so my mind is straight back into like all these wrestling, take me back to my childhood. But I think you said a couple of really good points, and the first one about being comfortable with it is important. It's like learning to sit with that feeling and knowing it's essentially it's not going anywhere, and it's over time it's getting more comfortable. And it's, I always kind of put analogies, same with like negative thoughts. for people, if you can use it in a way, know that you're not trying to stop them. It's like having it's like volume on music. What happens, it'll be very loud, but what we want to do over time is turn that volume down. So it doesn't go away, but it's just not, when you put the volume up full blast, it's blowing your ears off. That's what it is for a lot of people when they're in that headspace where they feel really bad for it. So for yourself over time, it's like turning down that volume, and essentially it's like not listening to it and understanding it. And then you made a really good point where a lot of it, like you were saying, was it's nearly the perception that you have on yourself. It's nearly like you're looking to yourself for like your shortcomings or like the things you're doing wrong or not doing, versus like for you, Grace is not like out looking back going, what isn't my mammy doing? Do you know? It's where like you're doing that, but she's probably like, thank God I get to go nuts with my friends or my grannies, whatever, you know. So I think we tend to take it on ourselves a lot, versus, and same for a lot of people, it's like it's kind of like you can't win, because it's like if you're at the gym, you're guilty because you should be at home. If you're at home, you're guilty because you should be looking after health in the gym. If you're asking people for help, you're feeling like you're being a burden, versus the person that's helping may actually like have been so glad you asked them to help, so it's this like nearly internal dialogue you have with yourself constantly that gets nearly like perception versus reality. It's our own thoughts and feelings more so than anything else that create this guilt, essentially.
And it's the conflict, that inner, it's more so a conflict. And in any conflict, you've got to negotiate. It's like, okay, I do need to get home. I do need to clean the house. It is like a bomb hit. I need to collect my child from school or creche or wherever it is. But right now, I deserve to take a time for myself. And something I always learned was, when you're gone, stay gone. As in, do you know what I mean? If somebody is, I learned this from when Grace was younger, but if someone is minding, your child while you're at work, you taking an extra maybe 20-30 minutes afterwards to get a quick walk done and then collecting them, it just makes it so much easier than you kind of collecting them, getting home, then leaving again, and that was something that I definitely found, kind of an extra 20 minutes, 30 minutes for someone else, who is helping you, who is giving you a hand, or who is taking the pressure off a little bit. That 20 minutes mightn't mean anything to them, but it could mean so much to you. It could be the difference between you coming home in an amazing mood, in a brilliant headspace, or you coming home feeling stressed and feeling like, oh, I need to get out. I just need to clear my head.
That's kind of a time management as well, isn't it? And like, that's something that I used to do. I was terrible at, was like, obviously going away from kids now, but it's like my time was just so like 11:59 to 12, I had to be in two different places. I gave myself no space ever. So it's constantly 5 minutes behind everything. I always remember, even doing PTs, I'd be eating chicken breast, going into like while the client is warming up, and I'm like eating because I didn't give myself any time. And I literally finished the workout 4 minutes before that, and be eating while I'm walking, like just give myself no time. And it was just, I didn't know any better back then, but like it's so funny now looking and going like, just give yourself a few minutes, just 5 minutes, even sometimes, and it really does, like we always talk about, those small little things. And like you said, that habit, that one little change to, say, another maybe mother, it could be the difference between their week and how they feel, you know what I mean? And it's having the awareness to be able to do that, and like, even for you, you obviously have to take a step back and think, just give yourself space and go, okay, do you know what? When this happened, when whoever has Grace, can I give an extra 20 minutes? I'll do this for myself, you know? And that's a skill. Like it sounds so simple, but it's actually very, really good skill to have, you know?
And I'm just going to jump in there, when you were talking about guilt, and choice and that, and Sharon touched on a lot about feeling guilty. Guilt is such a complex emotion, and how it um, really dictates a lot of our decisions, and why people are very unable to prioritize themselves, because usually when they end up saying no to someone, what happens next? They feel guilty for saying no. So what happens? You turn that no straight into a yes. So you say no, you feel guilty, you're like, okay, actually, do you know what? I can do this. And then um you're essentially basing your decision just off that guilt. And a lot of that time it can be very irrational guilt. And it's kind of like what Sharon was talking about, being able to rewrite the kind of narratives, that you're talking about in yourself, that's allowing you to make that decision. And it's kind of like putting guilt on trial and actually asking yourself, why am I actually feeling guilty here? Rather than letting the guilt take over in that moment. It's like literally asking yourself, why actually am I feeling guilty here about this decision?
I think that's probably the biggest problem. And Sharon, you said it at the start. It's like it doesn't really make sense sometimes. The whole like not prioritizing yourself, mom, you all that. And I think that's the biggest problem. This is what I want to delve into now. Is it's not that we don't know it. It's very, if you say to someone straight away, they go, "Yeah, I don't put myself first." It's not like it doesn't take much to figure out. It's like usually when you say, as soon as you say it, you're like, "That's me." So it's not an awareness; it's actually changing it. It becomes very difficult to change, and that's the hardest part, I think, because it becomes normal. It's just the way life is. It becomes addictive of again saying yes to everything, not putting yourself first. And Sharon and Ro, you literally did a last month's inner circle, and it's like finding order into chaos. Chaos becomes normal. Stress. That's it. You know. So for a lot of people, Tommy Weaven said this in our voice note yesterday. It's like some people have been doing this their whole life. They literally do not know any different. So they don't know how to cope outside of it. And then what happens is usually when you do decide to make a change, again, you start just like we do with nutrition or anything. But then what happens is life gets stressful, things come up. And in times of high stress, our decision making ability is impaired. And we usually revert back to old habits of just what we know, which is what I see a lot for people. And it's like, even in with coaching, sometimes, it's that's what we do is you're nearly like, hey, can you see what's happening here the last few weeks? You've gone back to where you were, and it's like it's a constant battle to change that, and that's where a lot of I suppose the long term work we do is about making those changes. And that's why it can be so difficult, because again, it's not like I would love to say people will listen to this podcast and then you'll change forever and that will be it. You'll always put yourself first. You'll never have any guilt. But unless we come up with unless Tommy has some magic potion or words that are going to change, I don't know. I don't think it's possible.
Definitely not. It is
Go on, Tommy.
yeah, definitely not, Matt. It's definitely a long-term process where you're going to fall back into behavioral patterns. I think that's something that people need to be aware of, when they start the journey to change, that there's going to be time where you're going to make decisions based off your old behavioral patterns. Because, like as you said, whether you're stressed, whether you're tired, whether you're feeling in low mood, and so many things can uh, dictate what you're going to do in that moment. And when you're in that kind of high state of arousal, the way we function is and to go back to what we're used to. But it's in those moments where we kind of make the choices of where we want to grow. And when you were talking about people prioritizing themselves, and like a lot of it, as Ro has already said from the start, it comes back to people's self-worth and how much people rely on external validation for themselves. So it's like, if I make everyone else happy, then that means that I'll be happy. So they essentially live their lives looking to seek to please other people, because they have this unconscious belief that if they do that, well, then essentially I'll be happy.
It's that thing. It's like, as long as everybody else is happy, I'm happy, but you're not. And then it's like, when we flip that and go, would the people that you're trying to make happy, if we said to them, do they want you to be unhappy? None of them are going to go, yeah, I want my mother to be unhappy. I want my mother not to look after myself or herself. I want her to only look after me. And that's where the whole irrational thought and the conflict starts. But to kind of move into more practical tips for people. So how do you do it? How do you go about starting to prioritize yourself?
You gave a great you gave great advice on this in the inner or the Empower Hour, even on like saying no and that feeling of discomfort.
I was just going to say, number one is, and it's obvious, but realize that you're a human being. And I don't think that's so obvious, but a lot of us don't think that. Like, we can be so compassionate and so loving to every other person in our lives. For some reason, we think we need to be superhuman, and that we're not good enough, we're not doing enough, we're not strong enough, we're not pretty enough, whatever it is, but we need to be superhuman. And I think that's the first thing, is just awareness that you are a human being, and the way you treat yourself. Would you treat anybody in your life like that? Not. Slowly showing, like Eve said, like that little bit of self-respect each morning, to give yourself that 5 minutes. I respect you enough to start our day right, rather than, like, imagine your partner, imagine waking up and be like, get the fuck up, get on with it, come on, we've so much to do. Like, they're gonna feel good. So it's like about having that, like, about that, Eve. See? Exhibit A. But yeah, it's just about, I think, being aware that you are a human being, and knowing that, like, your autopilot, like if you're in your 30s and you've decided, right, I'm going to change my life now. If your autopilot for 30 years has been putting down and feeling guilty, like when stress comes up, that's going to run again. And it's giving yourself that grace and realizing backwards. And you're not falling behind, you're not failing when that shit happens. So yeah, I know. Just remember that you are a human being, and the little things you do, would you do that to other people in your life? Because you probably wouldn't.
And can I clear up that I don't do that to Eve all the time? It was third strike. If she didn't get up the first two times, the third one, it's like, come on, we gotta go. And Eve, she's very difficult to get up in the morning compared to other humans.
I'm guilty. You can just.
So yeah, Eve, anything to help? Any tips for people to help prioritize themselves?
I think a really important part of prioritizing yourself is actually planning it. Because like a lot of people will, they'll plan, okay, I need to do my workouts, I need to work activities, I need to collect kids at this time, or whatever things you need to do, your appointments during the week. But no one actually plans their downtime. And I mean, if you don't plan it and life's busy, you're going to be like, oh, I don't have time for that, I'll just put it to the end of the pile. Whereas if you actually prioritize it and, put time aside for it, it's going to increase the chance of success. It's the same like, with your workouts. If you have them planned, you're a lot more likely to do them. So I think that's kind of a really important.
You get what you prioritize. It's a saying that I always use, and it really is. It's like, if you look at anything you're not doing in your life, the reality is you're just not prioritizing. And that's where, if you can plan it, and I like to try to gamify it and track it. So it's like something that, even with things like Tommy think Tommy, you said it was like saying no. That's actually quite a difficult skill to learn. So if you can start to learn it by saying no to little things, not like the big stuff, and then gamify it. So it's like, okay, what can I say no to? And I've done this myself, you know, and it's like you actually find a weird enjoyment from it. You're like, somebody asked me something, what? Ask me to do it. It's like, no, can't do that. And it feels good. But those no's allow you to start getting used to it. And then when the actual bigger stuff, you start to, again, before you jump in head first and go, yeah, I can do that, you take a step back and go, think about it. Actually, no, I can't. That's not, you know, I really don't have time to do that. And it sounds like a bit of a crazy thing to do, but it really helps with learning to say no. Because if you don't, what's the saying I always use? It's like every time, yeah, be careful what you say yes to, because every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to everything else. So when you need to choose your yeses wisely.
Yeah, and I definitely just touching on 2 points there about people able to help prioritize themselves. Um, is something a big word John or Roisin mentioned there is compassion. Is because I remember I had a client before and was talking to her about compassion, and her response to me at the end of it was, um, "What is that? How do I give that to myself?" And it kind of tells you the I suppose the story of how people live their daily lives without even one knowing about compassion, and number two actually being able to express that towards themselves. Because if we actually look what guilt is feeling bad about an act that you've done. Why do people feel bad about themselves for saying no to situations? Why do you feel guilty in that situation? Okay, if you can actually replace that guilt with a bit of compassion, then it makes it so much easier for you to be able to actually say no in that moment. And the second thing, definitely about being able to prioritize yourself, is actually finding out what your needs are. Finding out what like your own like physical, your own emotional, your own spiritual, your own sexual needs are, like actually being able to reflect on that and figuring out what it is that you actually need in life, and seeing then, because this is actually what I need, how can I go on and be able to actually prioritize these needs within my life itself.
Keep it PG, Tommy, now. Thought you were going down a road there.
To touch on what Tommy said there about self-compassion is like from a few women doing my course as well, is a lot of people don't know how to compassion to themselves, like this foreign thing. And I was guilty of it too, but like it's the simplest things of taking like a habit that you do every day. For like women, most women, you have a skincare routine in the morning. Even just slowing down that little routine, slapping the moisturizer on your face and trying to think of the 110 things you're doing that day, like gently put the cream on your face like you're putting it on your little girl, do you know? And even in that 5 minutes, it's going to add like maybe an extra minute to your day. You are starting your day by gently showing yourself a little bit of compassion in what you already do. So it's just taking things that you do and like, how would you do this to somebody else? Putting your lunch together and stuff like that. Like, would you be slapping your lunch together for like your little kid? Probably not. And so I think that's little ways of like trying to figure out how you can show and be a little bit more compassionate to yourself throughout your day without any crazy.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, like you said, it doesn't sound like much. And this is something that popped into my head there was at our last live event, we did a question. We asked a question about, I think it was kind of like midpoint of the year. And it's like, what are you most proud of? And the feedback that I got from that event was that question alone for a lot of people was mind blowing. As in, it was like, a lot of people said to me that were there, was like, my whole life, I've never really asked myself that or like stopped to do that. And I was like, it sounds so, it's just like, you know, it doesn't sound big. It's like, what are you proud of? It's not that it's a huge, yeah, it seems small, you know, but you can see that people just never do that for themselves. You know, it's foreign for most people.
It's simple questions to ask ourselves. Like a lot of us don't actually ask ourselves these questions. And something I talk about is like, you got to build a relationship with yourself as if you're another human being, but like when you go on a date or when you go to meet a new friend, like what are the questions and the qualities you want to know about that person? Know those qualities about yourself. Like usually you want to know like what they do for fun. Do you actually know what you like to do for fun? Involve other people, and that is not somebody else's idea of fun. It's your idea, and it's coming back to those simple questions. We don't ask ourselves. We should already know. It's all if we just tick the boxes and follow the rules, it'll all fall into place.
Yeah, and Eve and Sharon, you'll relate to this. On our check-in forms is a question saying, "What did you do to manage stress or unwind this week?" It's the most commonly answered one where people are like, "Nothing," or I've even had people be like, "I don't really understand what that means." That's what their answer in it, and it's like, yeah, yeah. And it's like if you look at it, it's like, okay, how's your stress level? High. What are you doing to manage your stress? Nothing. Uh, okay. It's kind of like, it's weird because it sounds so logical. And if you said to somebody who's not running, they would never come up to you and be like, I'm annoyed that I'm not any better at running. And it's like, oh yeah, I don't run. I haven't been running. So it's like they know that's just logical. But when it comes to managing your stress or prioritizing yourself, it's like it's a funny one because it's just people. It's just not a normal thing.
It's funny actually, even when I was doing my check-in with Eve last week, 2 weeks ago, it was like stress is really high, but here's all the stress management like, and even just hearing that affirmation of, yeah, Sharon, you need to keep doing this because this is what's getting you through now, is like, oh yeah, I know I need to stay doing this. He's the best coach, by the way.
Another kind of tip that I use for people recently as well, I find people who struggle to prioritize, put themselves first. What happens is if they ever get a pocket of time, I always say to people, like, try not to fill your time. So like a lot of people recently have like finished up courses or kids gone back to school, whatever it is, and they have a little bit more time. But what always happens, and I've like, obviously I try to say it like, not like I'm trying to run someone's life, but I'm like, you have this time now, don't bloody put something else in there. And that's where saying no, because a lot of people then will go, oh, sure, I have a load of time. I'll start this course, do this one, take this, the kids now can do 17 activities instead, and it's like not filling that time or filling it with something you can do for yourself. And that's another thing I look at is like sometimes for people, I just go, just this week, take half an hour, whatever it is. It's like fill that time with like something for yourself. Because what people do is like when they have time, it's like I'll do something for somebody else. I'll go get this ready for this person, or I'll do that. It's like if you can actually take the time, do something for yourself. It could be anything. It could be cleaning out your closet, whatever it is. Just make sure it's for you, not for other people. And I think practicing that as well really helps because you get that feeling of satisfaction from doing something like that, and you've done it for yourself, and it will allow you to keep doing it over time and build that kind of habit.
I said this last week as well, is like exaggerate when you're trying to put a new habit into your life, or when you do something for yourself and you're feeling guilty about doing it, but then you go for that walk and you clear your head. You come and be like, fuck, I'm so happy I did that. So good. And just take a moment to exaggerate how happy that little moment has made you. So next time you come around and you're talking yourself out of going for that walk, you're like, no, I know I'm going to feel fucking fantastic when I come back for it. And you're building that, like Matt said, you're building that data, all these good things and all the good that comes from putting yourself first.
And one thing I want to touch on, I have a couple of other ones that I think would be good. We'll kind of fly through them, but this one, Sharon, you mentioned it about kind of asking for help and getting support. This is where a lot of the times I see kind of two situations. One is people just don't have the support. So again, that's where like, even from a coaching perspective, a big part of what we do is providing support. But others actually do, but they don't want to be a burden. So they feel like they can't ask for support because they feel like they're a burden on everybody else. And I think that is a huge one for a lot of people. Sharon, would you say that is a big thing for a lot of mothers? Is like maybe the support actually being there, or even the communication, like having that conversation, because a lot of times we don't really communicate well. We think the other person is like, yeah, they won't want to do this, or they won't want to help me, instead of actually just having a conversation with somebody. Yeah, do you think that do you see that as a common barrier?
Yeah, completely. Like, I totally appreciate like how lucky I am to have so much help, so much support. And I think for me over the years, it always kind of needed to be that way. I did always need an awful lot of help. But even, chatting with other mothers, like it is that piece of I'm asking for help while I'm going to work, or I'm asking for help while I'm going here. And it's like, and now I have to ask so I can go to the gym as well. And it does feel like that. But even like, and every so often I get to a place where I'm like, I do still get that feeling of like really guilt, or really guilty even, or really emotional, or really like I just feel like I'm all the time asking for help. Um and like I remember one time even being to my mother like, Mammy, I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm doing is asking for you to take grace here when I'm doing this, or when I'm doing that, or when I'm doing the other. And I'd be getting really emotional about it, and she's like, Sharon, it's absolutely fine. I don't mind. I'll help you anytime you need it. I'll do whatever I can for you. And as she gets older, it's like, just it seems to be so much easier because there is less minding, a very, very small child. And I think when you have very small children and they do take so much energy and so much mind, and it can be that little bit harder. But it's just as they get that little bit older, it's just known as well that it does get that little bit easier. And like asking people to help, and if you have people around you who will help, take it. And then if you don't, I suppose it's okay, but what can I do self? It could be like I have a lot of mothers who maybe mightn't have someone to mind their child while they go off to the gym, especially during the summer. They'll do home workouts. You know, they mightn't be able to get out for a walk on their own, but can they get out, get a small bit of a walk, put a child in a buggy, put them on a bike? How can you do what's needed for you if maybe you haven't got the help that day? But if you have someone to ask, like, not to be afraid. The answer is always no if you don't ask.
Yeah, true. And I think
the answer will always be no because he's playing a game.
Yeah. Sorry, Tommy, were you going to say something? Did I cut you there?
Nope, I was just totally agreeing with Sharon.
I was actually listening to, I think it was a Mel Robbins podcast during the week, and she had somebody on about communication. The thing is, when you say something, like the person you're talking to, you're both hearing something different. So you might be asking for help and you're hearing, oh my God, I'm such a burden. Like I'm constantly asking for help. And the person you're asking the help is hearing, oh my God, this person like trusts me enough. They trust me enough to help out. It's not what you're saying. It's because everyone is hearing whatever is said in a different way. And it was this whole thing about like, it's kind of like asking, what did you hear rather than what did you say? We're both hearing it from different perspectives.
We're going to do a full podcast on that, on communication. I have that on my list. Because even me and Eve, any fight we ever have is actually miscommunication. The two of us are actually hearing different things. It's very interesting, and we'll delve into it definitely more. But Sharon, I also want to say for you, I think you have to give yourself some credit as well, because obviously Grace being older is a little bit easier, but if you look at yourself 10 years ago to now, your ability to do everything is night and day, So I was going to say, I was like, if you have another small child, would you probably way better at it, not to scare the shit out of you?
I don't think I'd get out. I don't think I'd get out the other side again if I hadn't. I think I was so young and so naive. I didn't have a clue, so it was like, yeah, it's grand. Oh no, I just, the one is fine.
Yeah. and just to finish, just to give a couple of quick tips as well that we didn't mention. I think, well, Eve actually did mention this. I think having a morning routine where you actually do something for yourself. So Roshan kind of even said it with skincare. Eve said doing something. It's really beneficial because it also reinforces that. And it's like if you can do it first thing in the morning, do something for yourself, and you kind of can build that habit. And it starts, like I said, you get what you prioritize. So if you prioritize your day, starting with something for yourself, it can become a good habit, and you can even tie in things like morning affirmations. So I think that's really powerful. Is sounds like such weird to be like, I prioritize myself. Even writing things like that down is you're actually just training your subconscious, your brain, to focus on that stuff. And it will, you do that enough and it will just become a natural thing. And then the last thing on that is like reflecting, journaling, and celebrating the wins. So that's where we've mentioned it's very easy to slip back into old habits and time to get that. So you need to actually reflect to go, okay, have I been prioritizing myself? And then you need to, that's why journaling can be so good. It's like getting the stuff out of your head, asking yourself good questions like we've talked about, and then celebrating wins and looking at those small things and go, I am doing that. Because often if you don't search for those, you'll miss it. Time will just go by. You won't. There's always something else that needs to be done. So you need to actually search for those wins that nearly congratulate yourself, and it's stacking them. And I think if you can do those things alongside all the other kind of tips, it will make a massive difference over time.
Yeah, massively.
Even I was just going to say that, like, it's like a data, like we're a computer. So you imagine if you're like rewiring yourself, you have to like collect the data and just like like journaling or reflecting at the end of the day is you reaffirming that like this is the right thing, this is what we're doing now. So if you're like a little computer, you just have to collect the data and put in these inputs, because our autopilot is the guilt and the negative self-talk and everything that's we've grown up with programming.
Clearly, like that's why reflection is so powerful, because a lot of us are walking around with a very negative bias. We have a very negative perception of ourselves, other people, and the world. And when you actually take a moment to sit down and either talk to someone or reflect with yourself, to actually look back on maybe your day or a week, um, that's where you find those very self-empowering moments where it's like, actually, you know what, I actually did feel good in this moment. It was just something else that day that didn't allow me to actually either feel that feeling or allow me to actually acknowledge it. And that's why, like, as I said, self-reflection is just so powerful for us to be able to, as Ocean said, reprogram the database that we have inside in here.
And that's something else alongside that I like is using like mental frameworks. I think can be really good to help, because what these like little frameworks, or you might call them mantras or sayings, they can like in like one sentence they can pack so much emphasis or importance, and like I always use the framework like awareness, decision, action. So first we must become aware of something. You can't change it without first knowing. Then you make the decision to actually change it, and then you have to take action. So for a lot of people, they're already aware of they don't put themselves first. They need to make a conscious decision to change it, and then they need to take action, which is a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. And I think a couple of the sayings I like here is like, in order to serve others, you must first serve yourself. And I think that framework is like, for me, it was just like a light bulb thing. It's like, yes, because all of us usually, it's because we're doing stuff for other people because we want to serve them. Yeah, we want to look after them, but you actually must first serve yourself. And then even for me, another one, like time away from work allows me to work better, which really helps me mentally to know when I'm away from work, it's actually a benefit. Instead of me being like guilty for not being working, it's like, this is recharging me, which is going to allow me to actually work better. So same with like serving yourself. It's like when you're doing things for yourself, you're like, yes, this is going to allow me to be a better mother. This is going to allow me to turn up to my work with more energy. And then like I think it was Sarah Dermot said this, is like, time put into yourself is time well spent. I love that saying. I'm like, that is great. It's such a, and like, if you can always look at that, because again, when we're doing things for ourselves, we feel like it's nearly a waste of time, or we should be doing anything else. So it's like, those like mental frameworks can always bring me back around, or I tie it to those activities and go, okay, yeah, this is, I'm serving myself, you know? And then when you look at it, if you look at why you're doing that, so if it's for your family, your kids, whatever, think of it the other way. It's like, we all want to be role models for those people. So imagine you're going around stressed, tired, angry, agitated, you're eating crap, you're not exercising. You know, we are all energy. That's the energy you're going to give out to those people. Is that what you would want them to take on board? No, you never would. So if you can use that as a nearly an opposite, it's like the other extreme. It's like, that's not what I want. I'm going to do the opposite, you know? So yeah, any final thoughts before we finish up?
I know everything here has been very serious and all of this, but once you start this process of putting yourself first, it's so fucking fun. You realize how you can rewire your brain, and you have the control to make yourself feel better on a day-to-day basis. It's fucking fun, and it's so exciting. And I know it's like this serious, and you might be like, oh my God, there's so much I need to do. You grasp that feeling of how good it can feel. You start chasing that. It's not as like hectic. It's enjoyable process.
Find what brings you joy. Find what improves your energy. Find what helps you switch off and kind of do more of what makes you happy.
Love it. And to finish, it's funny because, Ro, you said about today being like deep. The random question I got today is deep. What do you consider the best decision you've made thus far in your life?
The best decision was moving to Budapest and putting myself in an apartment with the sole goal to get to know who the fuck I was.
Cooney, I'm going to answer that. When the only thing that came up for me when you said that to me was simply not giving up.
Mine was moving back to Ireland from Australia and getting into setting up MC Future Fitness.
I have no clue.
He's going to vacate the room.
Eve has left the chat.
Doing a 10K this morning, Eve.
Taking up running. I'm going to say that.
In your relationship with me.
Sharon is in deep thought.
Yeah, like, you know, there's a lot, but I suppose for me over the last few years, personally, professionally, physically, being back with Future Fitness.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
That's the way to finish it.
Yeah, and that is how we're going to finish it.
And we better press stop now before we all express how we actually feel. We will see you all in the next episode. Thank you for listening.
Ciao.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Future Fitness Lifestyle. If you found value in today's show, please take a moment to leave us a review and share it with someone who could benefit. Every single review or share helps us grow the show and will allow us to keep bringing you more great content. Stay tuned for weekly episodes where we'll be sharing more tips and insights to help you take your health, fitness and mindset to the next level. Thanks again for joining us, and remember, consistency beats perfection. See you in the next episode.